Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. When it comes to magical schools in the world of Harry Potter, the first name that springs to mind is, of course, Hogwarts. Thanks to the books and films, this castle has become the ultimate symbol of magical education. Later, we're introduced to Beauxbaton and Durmstrang, schools that appear in the Goblet of Fire, slightly expanding the magical world's geography. But if you think magic is confined to Europe and ancient castles, it's time to discover Ilvermorny, an enigmatic and deeply fascinating North American school of witchcraft and wizardry, hidden among the misty mountains of New England. Let's dive into its atmosphere and uncover the secrets this magical stronghold of the New World holds. Enjoy the journey. Number 1. The school was founded by 3 wizards and 1 no-mage. Ilvermorny's story begins with Isolde Sayre, a young witch who escaped Ireland and fled to the New World. She rescued 2 boys, Chadwick and Webster, and met James Stewart, a no-mage, non-magical person who would become her lifelong companion. When the boys expressed a desire to study at Hogwarts, Isolde refused. It was too far and too dangerous. Instead, she promised them a school of their own, right there in America. And thus, Ilvermorny was born, first a small, almost homemade school for 2 students, and later a true bastion of magical knowledge for America's young witches and wizards. Number 2. One of the founders was a descendant of Salazar Slytherin. Isolde Sayre, Ilvermorny's founder, was born around 1603 in Ireland. After her parents were tragically killed, she was raised by Gormleth Gaunt, a descendant of Salazar Slytherin. Gormleth believed only pure bloods should practice magic, and raised Isolde in an atmosphere of arrogance and dark arts. When Isolde was forbidden even to attend Hogwarts, she ran away, taking with her the only memory of her mother, a golden brooch shaped like a Gordian knot. That very brooch would later become the symbol of the school she founded. Number 3. It's located in Massachusetts. For years, fans speculated about Ilvermorny's location. Was it on an island, in Canada, a floating ship? The answer was simpler and more beautiful. The school stands atop Mount Greylock, the highest point in Massachusetts. Protected by enchantments, the area is hidden even from no-mages, who sometimes catch glimpses of a wreath of misty clouds circling the mountaintop. The place seems to breathe magic and mystery, making it the perfect haven for learning witchcraft. Number 4. Like Hogwarts, Ilvermorny has 4 houses. The idea of naming the houses after the founders was quickly abandoned. After all, Webster Boot House didn't have the best ring. Instead, each founder chose a magical creature that inspired them. Chadwick chose the Thunderbird, a storm-summoning bird. Webster picked the Wampus, a fierce panther-like beast. Isolde selected the horned serpent, with which she felt a magical bond. James, unfamiliar with magical creatures, chose the Pukwudgie in honor of the grumpy spirit William, whom Isolde often mentioned. Thus the 4 houses were born: Thunderbird, Wampus, Horned Serpent, and Pukwudgie. Interestingly, these creatures come from Native American mythology, sparking some criticism over cultural appropriation. Yet at the same time, they reflect Ilvermorny's aspiration to blend diverse cultures and traditions. Number 5. No sorting hat. Unlike Hogwarts, Ilvermorny doesn't use a sorting hat. Instead, first years stand on a Gordian knot symbol at the center of the hall, surrounded by 4 carved statues. Each creature calls to the student in its own way. Thunderbird flaps its wings. Wampus lets out a roar. Horned Serpent lights the crystal on its forehead. Pukwudgie raises its arrow. If more than one statue chooses a student, the student decides. Sounds a bit like Harry Potter's sorting moment, doesn't it? Number 6. Wands. In Britain, wizards buy wands before entering school. At Ilvermorny, students receive their wands after being sorted. They choose them in a special wand room, adding even more magic to the enrollment process. Until 1965, under the Rappaport Law, similar to Britain's Statute of Secrecy, Students were not allowed to take their wands home. Only after turning 17 could they carry their wand outside the school. Number 7, uniforms. The school uniform tells a story of love. The blue represents Isolde's favourite colour. She once dreamed of being in Ravenclaw. The cranberry red honours James Stewart's favourite pie. Their robes are adorned with a golden Gordian knot, a symbol of memory and legacy. Every Ilvermorny student quite literally wears the school's history, its founders' love, and the magic of the new world on their sleeves. Number 8, hidden garden of healing plants. The hidden garden lies beneath the central courtyard, behind a wall of ivy that doesn't always exist. It appears only to those who answer the garden's riddle, a question whispered by the plants themselves under the full moon. Mine asked, "What softens pain without touch?" said May Applewhite, a second-year Pukwudgie. She answered, "Kindness." The wall shimmered, then parted. Inside, the air glows faintly green. Vines murmur. Roots shift underfoot. The garden is believed to have been planted by Isolde Sayre herself, using seeds gifted by tribal healers and seeds gathered from wild, unknown forests. She wrote, "A garden should heal what wands cannot." Among the plants are the famous moon clover, whose silver petals pulse when near broken bone, and the everwillow, whose leaves hum lullabies when steeped in warm water. Students harvest carefully, only with permission. One wrong cut and the plant shrinks away. In 2004, a student named Terence Bell tried to pluck firemint during daylight. The plant screamed. The next morning, his eyebrows were missing. "The garden doesn't punish," said Professor Elodie Wren. "It teaches." Those who tend it leave, changed, and those who listen closely say the soil itself remembers the hands that touch it. Number 9, the ghost of Mount Greylock. They say Sarah Brooks was only 16 when she vanished. She had wandered into the forests of Mount Greylock searching for moonshade moss, an ingredient said to bloom only in silence. She never returned, but her story didn't end there. Since 1853, students have whispered of a glowing figure at the tree line, silver light around her like fog. Always in the full moon, always looking. In 1987, Jacob Redfeather, a second-year Thunderbird, lost his way during a storm. He claims a girl with long white hair took his hand and led him back to the main path. She didn't speak, he said, but her eyes said I was safe. The legend grew from there. Some students leave flowers near the mountain trail before exams, hoping to earn Sarah's favor. A few claim she teaches, not with words, but with signs. "I woke with runes drawn in frost on my window," wrote Clara Dean in her diary, class of 1919. They weren't from any book, and they worked. Professors never confirm her presence, but none forbid the offerings, and every year on the first full moon of spring, the candles left at the forest's edge burn just a little longer. Number 10, dueling as a sacred tradition. Every spring, Ilvermorny's grand hall transforms. The walls shimmer with protective enchantments, and the floor glows with faint traces of past spells. It's time for the four-house duel. Students train for months, not for glory, but for discipline, for honor. "A duel is not a fight," says Professor Rhiannon Clay, who oversees the tournament. "It's a conversation between wills." The final round always draws a crowd, with older students betting on strategies and first years whispering legends of past champions. One such name is still spoken with reverence, Elijah Wren, Thunderbird, who once disarmed 3 opponents in a single round without raising his voice. The rules are strict. No curses that maim. No spells to humiliate. A bow before the first strike, a bow after the last. Points are awarded not just for power, but for control and cleverness. In the 2006 final, Lila Brooke of Horned Serpent used a reflection charm on the dome itself to redirect her opponent's flame, winning the match with a single flick of her wrist. "I didn't need to strike," she said. "I just needed to listen." That year, her house carried the Gordian Cup with pride. The cup engraved with golden threads, is placed in the Hall of Echoes for the entire year, visible proof of magical excellence. The duel isn't about punishment or rivalry, it's a lesson. Every student at Ilvermorny must learn to duel with respect. Some of the school's strongest friendships began with a bow and a wand raised in challenge. "We don't duel to defeat," said Headmistress Fontaine. "We duel to grow." The echoes of past spells linger in the hall, whispered like blessings. And as the year turns, new names rise, new stances are tested, and every duel becomes a step toward mastery, not just of magic, but of oneself. Number 11. The Whispering Hall Mystery. No one knows exactly where the Whispering Hall is. It doesn't appear on any map, and its doors are never in the same place twice. Students say it calls to you, not with words, but with a breath of air behind your ear, or a faint sound like your name carried on fog. In 1973, Malcolm Reed, a horned serpent 6th year, vanished for 6 hours during a snowstorm. He reappeared at dawn in the grand stairwell, soaked and speechless, clutching a silver medallion that no one had seen before. When asked what happened, he simply said, "It showed me everything I feared, and then who I might become." According to school legend, the Whispering Hall holds a single object, the Mirror of Origins. It does not reflect faces, it reflects purpose. When you stand before it, it shows not who you are now, but the path you're meant to walk. Some say it's painful, some say it's beautiful. Professor Albina Drexler once admitted, "I saw the hall in my 7th year. It told me I would never become a healer, though I had studied for it all my life. I became a curse breaker instead. The hall never lies. Her name is now engraved on the Ilvermorny Wall of Valor." The whispers aren't always kind. There are tales of students who followed the sound and returned shaken, eyes wide with things they couldn't explain. Only one rule seems certain: if the hall calls you, you must go alone. No one has ever entered it in a group, and no spell has ever forced the door open. "Magic can break locks," said Professor Drexler, "but not fate. Most students will never hear the whisper, but once in a generation, someone does, and what they see inside changes everything. Number 12. Friendship with Indigenous magical communities. When Ilvermorny was still only a wooden cottage on the mountainside, Isolt Sayre was saved more than once by the wisdom of those who knew the land better than she did. It was a Mohawk healer named Teonaquen, whose name meant flames inside the snow, who taught Isolt how to speak to whispering pines and which herbs could calm a child's fever. She gifted Isolt a pouch of dried black root vine, a powerful grounding charm, and said, "This mountain listens, learn how to ask." Isolt never forgot. Neither did the school that grew from her promise. Today, Ilvermorny students still visit the magical villages of the Mohawk, Seneca, and Wampanoag. These aren't class trips, they're exchanges. Students stay in the communities for days, help gather star moss, carve symbols into stone, and learn wind reading from elders. In return, young tribal witches and wizards are welcomed to Ilvermorny's halls as guests and teachers. Every fall, a ceremony known as the Gathering of Circles brings all magical cultures of the continent to the Great Hall. "Our roots run different," said Elder Mahegan Tallcloud in one address, "but our magic grows from the same earth." One of the most beloved professors at Ilvermorny today is Wampanoag-born magic historian Nia Ashburton. She teaches a course called The Spirit of the Land, and her wand is carved from white ash found on sacred ground with a thunderbird tail feather core. "This is not just spell work," she tells students, "this is remembrance." In her class, no books are opened for the first month. Students instead listen, walk barefoot on the mountain path, and learn the old words for water, sky, and fire. "Magic," she says, "has a language older than Latin." Some spells taught by tribal wizards can't be written down. They live only in voice, rhythm, and air. When 11-year-old Leo Gardner performed one such chant during his 3rd month at Ilvermorny, he swore the nearby trees swayed toward him in answer. It wasn't a trick, he told Professor Ashburton. They bowed. No one laughed. Because at Ilvermorny, the magic of the first people is not folklore. It is honored, protected, and still alive in every stone of the school. Number 13, Magic Under the Stars. The starry observatory stands on a cliff just beyond the east wing of Ilvermorny. There are no walls, only enchanted glass panels arching overhead like a second sky. At night, the magic begins. The stars don't just shine, they move. They shimmer in waves, reach down in glowing threads, and when a student raises their wand, the constellations shift in reply. "It's like dancing with the sky," said Ayanna Brooks, a 4th year in Thunderbird, who once traced the arc of Ursa Major and saw it glow gold in answer. Her instructor whispered, "The stars have seen you." Ayanna's moment wasn't rare, but it was powerful. Each student in the observatory is taught to build a personal star map, not from charts, but from what they see, because in Ilvermorny, the constellations sometimes appear differently to different people. Some claim the stars show warnings, others see guidance. When Jonah Whitfield, a 5th year in Pukwudgie, looked up one winter night, he didn't see Orion. He saw a long-forgotten pattern called the Flame Messenger. The next day, he received a letter that his family's home had survived a fire. "The stars knew before we did," he told his classmates. "They always know." The observatory isn't just for astronomy, it's for magic that listens. Students are taught that each constellation carries a spell, an echo of ancient power. Some stars pulse with elemental energy. Others hum like wards. "We don't read the sky," Professor Winaway once said. "We translate it." There are no telescopes, only open air, silver chalk, and crystal wands that shimmer faintly under starlight. When 2 students performed a sky-binding under Polaris, the northern light burst into a brief spiral, and their chart revealed a new glyph. It wasn't in any book. There's a legend that only the stars in Ilvermorny's sky can reveal your soul's deepest path. When the constellation of the wandless appears, the old saying goes, someone among us is ready to change the world. It last appeared in 1924. Some say it glowed faintly just weeks ago during a stormless night over Mount Greylock. No one's sure who it chose, but students still watch, still wait, because when the sky leans down to speak, only those who dare to look up can understand its message. Number 14. Invitations Delivered by the Wind. One cold spring morning in Vermont, 11-year-old Nora Bellingham was brushing her teeth when the wind whispered her name. It wasn't a sound exactly, it was more like a feeling. A gentle breath brushing past her ear, carrying the syllables of her name with eerie clarity. "Nora," it said again, barely louder than a sigh. She dropped her toothbrush and ran outside barefoot. There, on the porch, lay a small bundle wrapped in birch bark and tied with a thin red cord. Inside was her letter to Ilvermorny, a slip of parchment scented faintly with pine, and a rough shard of bark from Mount Greylock itself. She stood in silence as the wind stirred the trees once more, almost laughing. Unlike Hogwarts, which uses owls to deliver acceptance letters, Ilvermorny relies on wind magic. It's older than the school itself, rooted in the belief that the land itself chooses its students. The wind doesn't simply bring a message, it announces destiny. "Some say it's the mountain calling you," one teacher once explained. Others think it's the magic inside the air. Most children who are chosen remember the exact moment it happens. Some hear a far-off echo of thunderbird wings flapping. Others claim they hear the high-pitched whistle of a Pukwudgie's arrow. Cameron Holt, who would later become one of the youngest head boys in Thunderbird history, remembered feeling the temperature drop suddenly just before his name floated on the breeze. "It was like the sky bent down to say hello," he wrote in his diary, which now rests in Ilvermorny's library. "I knew something impossible was about to happen, and then it did." When he found his letter tucked between the branches of the oak tree he used to climb as a child, he knew there was no going back. The envelope was warm to the touch. Inside, the handwriting curved like flowing air. Though not mentioned in any official Ilvermorny textbook, this form of invitation has become part of school legend. Some believe that the sound you hear, be it whisper, birdsong, or even thunder, reflects your future house. If the wind carries a warm, humming tone, you may belong to horned serpent. A fierce gust might mean wampus. No matter the sign, one thing remains certain. The wind only speaks once, and when it does, you listen. Number 15, the ghostly transfiguration, Professor. In the dusky northern wing of Ilvermorny, where shadows pool near stained-glass windows and portraits whisper among themselves, students speak in hushed tones about one presence above all, Professor Eleanor Quincy. Her name, spoken aloud, sends ripples down the spine of any first year, not because she's cruel or unkind or unjust, but because she isn't alive. She hasn't been alive for nearly a century. And yet she still teaches transfiguration, with chalk that floats across the board, with cold that sinks into the bones, with silence that speaks louder than a scream. Eleanor Quincy once stood among the most formidable minds at Ilvermorny, a scholar whose loyalty to her subject bordered on the sacred. Born in 1812, she had once written that transfiguration was not a branch of magic, but the soul's symphony rendered through will and precision. Her office, when she had one, was filled with meticulous journals and glass cases where beetles transformed into emerald rings and acorns burst into bluebirds with a flick of her wand. But the most startling aspect of her legacy isn't the beauty of her craft, it's that she never truly left. Those who enter her old classroom, room 417 in the Whitmore Tower, often describe the moment with eerie consistency. The room is neither warm nor cold at first, just still. It's when a student miscasts something dangerous, a desk that writhes instead of shifts, a ferret that becomes a snarling hound, that everything changes. The air grows thin and sharp. The lanterns flicker. A gust of inexplicable wind tears through the room. And then she appears. A flickering outline at first, gaining shape like ink spreading in water, until a full-bodied ghost stands at the front of the class. Eleanor Quincy, still dressed in high-collared robes from the 1800s, her grey hair coiled like parchment scrolls atop her head, surveys the room with unreadable eyes. There is no speech, there are no lectures, but there is order. Her gaze is enough to still the most panicked wand hand. Her silent nod is command enough to reverse a botched incantation. She does not tolerate messes, and never has. Transfiguration, when mishandled, she once wrote in her notes, now preserved in the school archives, is not mere error, it is an insult to nature. Her presence, even as a ghost, still upholds this sacred standard. She does not show up for mere mistakes, she does not scold. But if you feel the cold, you are being watched. In 1998, a student named Clara Muldoon attempted to transfigure a hedgehog into a tea kettle without properly rehearsing the wand movement. The result was a creature with metallic spikes and steam sputtering from its ears. Clara later recounted that the temperature dropped so sharply that her breath fogged before her. She turned, and there was Quincy, as clear as the moon in a winter sky. Clara dropped her wand. The hedgehog, now frozen mid-transfiguration, began to unravel. The ghostly professor raised her hand, and without a word, the room righted itself. Clara later wrote in her diary, "Her eyes locked on mine. I felt ashamed, but also safer." It is this sense of strange security that defines the ghostly professor's role. Though fear surrounds her legend, students quickly learn she is no malevolent spectre. She is not Peeves with a textbook. She is structure, discipline, precision. In a school where misfires could turn classmates into porcelain or pulp, her oversight is not just helpful, it is vital. Teachers themselves, particularly those newly appointed, regard her with reverence. Professor Dante Wick of the Charms Department once said, "We might as well list her among staff. She's saved more students from disaster than most of us with beating hearts." Quincy's story, however, is not merely one of continued service beyond the grave, it is also one of choice. According to Ilvermorny's record books, she passed away in 1929, reportedly in her sleep, a wand resting by her pillow, open notes at her bedside. But within weeks, reports began surfacing of flickering lights in the transfiguration wing, of chalk scratching itself across the board, of silent corrections made to miswritten spells. The school consulted with the Department of Magical Entities. No banshee, poltergeist, or spectre matched the behavior. It was a student, Martin Leary, 5th year, Thunderbird House, who first whispered, "It's her, it's Professor Quincy. She's come back to make sure we get it right." And perhaps that was always the truth. Quincy was a scholar beyond measure, but she was also a guardian of the delicate balance between what is and what can be. Transfiguration, she taught, was not just about change. It was about understanding essence. "You must respect the subject," her notes say, "or it will unmake you." That warning now echoes not from parchment, but from her very presence, gliding silently through rows of startled students. Many ask why she appears only in moments of failure. Some think it's her method of teaching from beyond, the final lesson in humility. Others suspect that her essence is tied to magical instability itself, her spirit drawn to it like a compass. But among older students, a theory persists that she watches all the time, but chooses only to reveal herself when necessary. If she doesn't appear, they say, you've done nothing terribly wrong. It is this logic that comforts trembling second years and steels the nerves of those attempting their first full human-to-animal transformation. The sense of being watched, however, is not entirely psychological. Ghosts in the magical world are often echoes, remnants, memories with just enough sentience to linger. But Eleanor Quincy's ghost seems sharper, more precise, more aware. Some say she reacts to individual students differently, more often appearing for Wampus House students known for impulsive casting, or offering longer pauses before Ravenclaws as if weighing the thought behind their incantation. Her actions are not random, nor chaotic. They are chosen, deliberate, perhaps even caring. Number 16, the staircase that appears at midnight. Every month, sometime between the full moon and its retreat into darkness, a hidden staircase reveals itself within the hallowed walls of Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It is not marked on any official blueprint, nor does it respond to magical summoning or detection charms. Students who claim to have seen it speak in hushed tones, as if even the walls of the castle are listening. They say it appears near the Thunderbird Common Room, though others swear it has been seen materializing near the library or behind the portrait of Seraphina Picquery. There is no fixed location, only one constant: it arrives at midnight and it is gone by dawn. What lies at the top is the subject of whispered speculation, but those who dare climb it tell stories that suggest a piece of the school has been deliberately hidden, perhaps for centuries. One of the earliest recorded encounters with the Midnight Staircase came from Edith Goldleaf, a horned serpent student known for her obsession with magical cartography. In her private journal, now preserved in the Ilvermorny archives, she documented an experience from the winter of 1927. It was as though the stone walls sighed open, she wrote, and a staircase spiraled upward where before there had been only broom closets and dust. Edith, driven by curiosity and the thrill of discovery, ascended. What she found was not just forgotten furniture or cobwebbed halls, but a room lined with objects of unknown origin, wands resting on velvet, ancient scrolls that refused to open, and portraits of people whose names have long vanished from Ilvermorny's records. The legend of the staircase speaks of a fifth floor, a place unrecognized by official guides and not counted among the school's known architecture. Ilvermorny, like its European counterpart Hogwarts, is a building alive with magic. Staircases move, doors appear and disappear, and entire hallways can vanish for days. But the Midnight Staircase is different. It does not merely move, it exists outside the normal timeline of the castle. Those who ascend it say they feel a pressure in the air, as though they've entered a place suspended in time. Some describe ticking sounds from unseen clocks, others say their pocket watches freeze the moment they cross the threshold. In 1963, a student named Tobias Merrick disappeared for 4 days. A wampus fifth year with a reputation for bravado, Tobias had dared to climb the Midnight Staircase during a thunderstorm. When he returned, he was pale, aged, and no longer spoke of what had happened. His friends noticed a drastic change. His once golden hair had turned white, and his formerly boisterous voice was now a low whisper. The only item he carried back was a wand unlike any known to wand-makers in North America, gnarled, made from an unknown wood, and tipped with a splinter of obsidian. Tobias never graduated. He left school that year and was last seen boarding a train to the Rocky Mountains, muttering about echoes trapped behind stone. The faculty never officially acknowledged the staircase, but one telling moment occurred in 1989 during a lesson in magical theory. Professor Elvira Hart, a no-nonsense witch with strong views on magical anomalies, was asked directly by a student about the Midnight Staircase. She hesitated, a rare break in her otherwise smooth lectures, before replying, "There are things in this school older than its stones, and some doors should stay closed." It was the only time the topic was ever mentioned in a classroom. The student who asked, Dylan Reed, later became a cursebreaker for MACUSA and went on record in 2004 saying that the fifth floor is real and it doesn't belong to this timeline. More recent testimonies have surfaced from students like Marisol Trent, a Pukwudgie, who claimed to have found the staircase during her 7th year in 2011. Her account was widely dismissed until she produced a tattered book she said she retrieved from the top floor. The title had been burned away, but the content inside included spells not found in any standard curriculum, some resembling lost incantations from the time of Isolde Sayre herself. One of them, a binding charm meant to trap shadows in mirrors, bore striking resemblance to an unfinished entry in Isolde's private notes, stored deep in Ilvermorny's restricted section. Those who have ventured to the top say the space is not always the same. One year it may be a dusty archive filled with forgotten tomes. Another year it may resemble a classroom from the early 1700s, complete with quills suspended mid-air, and a blackboard that writes on itself in Latin. Still others have described a hallway of locked doors, each humming softly as if something behind them is alive. In all cases, however, there is one rule. The visitor must descend before the sun rises. Those who fail to do so risk more than detention. They risk being caught in a fold of time, unable to return. A warning is carved into the stone at the top of the stairs, written in a dialect believed to be a hybrid of English and Gaelic. Roughly translated, it reads, "This is the edge of memory. Step lightly, lest memory swallow you." Scholars debate whether it was placed there by Isolde Sayre herself or by a later headmaster, but most agree the message is not metaphorical. The staircase, it seems, does not merely lead to forgotten rooms, but to pieces of the school that were never meant to be remembered. Some say these are relics of the school's earliest days, when its magical protections were still raw and unformed. Of the most chilling tales is the case of Lena Brightwing, a Thunderbird who disappeared in 1978 and was never seen again. Her roommates remembered her saying she was going to find out what the fifth floor really is. All that remained was her journal, found near the north stairwell, open to a final entry that read, "Midnight, the wall is breathing." No trace of Lena was ever found, but once a year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, the wall near the Thunderbird common room is said to feel warm to the touch. Number 17, Student Bonds with Magical Creatures. At Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, The whisper of leaves and the rustle of wings hold a meaning far deeper than mere nature. Hidden within the expansive, enchanted reserve encircling the granite walls of the castle is a tradition unlike any found in European magical institutions. Beginning in the third year, every student is entrusted with an unusual responsibility to form a bond with a magical creature. But this is not a simple lesson in care or observation. It is a ritual of growth, a rite of passage. In the heart of Ilvermorny's oldest traditions, student and beast are meant to mirror one another, not as master and servant, but as partners in understanding the untamed world of magic. The creatures in question are not kept in cages nor charmed into compliance. They roam free within the verdant sanctuary of the Forbidden Glen, a stretch of thick forest, crystalline streams, and mossy caves that respond only to the headmistress's magic. Within its borders live creatures both noble and savage, hippogriffs that glide silently over misty treetops, centaurs who read the stars with proud suspicion, whispering pukwudgies who vanish when seen too clearly, and even the elusive furupes whose glowing fur is said to reflect the soul of the onlooker. The assignment, issued every year at the autumn equinox, demands students spend time within the glen, seeking not the most powerful creature, but the one who sees them as kin. Some bonds form instantly. It was said that in 2017 a Ravenclaw-equivalent horned serpent student named Ella Marchbanks stood still beneath a trembling ash tree, her hand outstretched for hours until a one-eyed hippogriff limped toward her from the mist. The creature, dubbed Cadwallon by the keepers, had been known for years to attack anyone who approached its den. Yet on that day, he bowed. Marchbanks's professors later claimed they had never witnessed such a connection. Professor Song, the Care of Magical Creatures instructor, was reported to have said, "This was not an act of taming, it was an act of mutual recognition." While not every pairing is so dramatic, each one carries its own significance. Students are expected to care for the creature they bond with, feeding it, healing minor wounds, studying behavior, and even translating magical signals if the creature is sentient. In cases like pukwudgies, who are capable of speech and fierce wit, the relationship becomes more intellectual than physical. The story of Nico Bellamy, a Wampus House student who formed a reluctant alliance with a pukwudgie named Irks, became part of campus legend. Irks mocked Nico relentlessly for his poor herbology skills, but was later seen guiding him through the woods when he was injured by a thornback wolf. When asked why he helped, Irks reportedly hissed, "The boy's an idiot, but he's my idiot." There is no charm or hex to force these connections. Some students return from the glen for weeks with nothing but scratches and muddy robes, frustrated and feeling overlooked. Others find their match on the first day, drawn by something they cannot name. The most prized connections are those initiated by the creature itself. A centaur choosing to speak with a student, or a furupes curling around a child's feet and refusing to move, is seen not only as a personal triumph, but as a moment of deep magical significance. It echoes in many ways the unspoken connection between wizard and patronus, a manifestation of trust and inner truth. Each bonded pair is recorded in the school's Book of Companions, a weathered leather tome kept in the headmistress's office. Its pages shimmer faintly, and it is said the ink within moves like silver smoke. The entry for Ella Marchbanks reads, "She stood like stone, he bowed like thunder. Cadwallon of the North Glen accepts the oath of Marchbanks, so witnessed, so bound." Students often read past entries to seek insight or courage. Some pages are filled with joy, doodles of furupes playing in snow, or transcripts of riddles exchanged with mischievous pukwudgies. Others end in heartbreak. A note dated 1984 reads, "Bond broken. Thunderchild of the eastern sky found dead. Student Joseph Langley in mourning. Glen silent for 3 days." The process not only teaches magical biology but reveals a student's soul. The creatures are not fooled by bravado or charm. They see what is hidden. A kind-hearted student with no confidence may find themselves approached by a wounded creature seeking gentle care. A proud, fiery soul might be tamed by the quiet wisdom of a centaur's gaze. More than once, bonds have shaken students into self-reflection, forcing them to confront fears and faults long ignored. This living mirror becomes a partner, a teacher, and in many ways, a friend. Creatures are not without danger. Hippogriffs require deference and respect. Centaurs, though wise, have no love for children, often testing a student's patience with silence or cryptic warnings. A particularly rare and aggressive species, the rime-winged screever, once sliced open a boy's hand with its beak when he reached too quickly. The lesson was learned. In Ilvermorny, magic is not to be owned, but to be understood through humility. Professor Song reminds each class, the Glen does not forget arrogance, nor does it forgive. Despite these risks, the duets, as they are affectionately known, become central to a student's time at Ilvermorny. Fourth-year rituals often incorporate the creature. Some students bring feathers or scales as tokens for potion brewing, while others write long essays comparing their companions' behavior to magical theories. The bonds sometimes grow so strong that students request to remain in touch after graduation. While the Ministry of Magic has regulations about contact with magical beasts, Ilvermorny grants special licenses for alumni with proven care records. Ella Marchbanks, now an expert in beast conservation, still visits Cadwallon thrice a year. Number 18, the Festival of Lights and Legends. Every year, as the golden leaves begin to fall across the Berkshire Mountains, and a chill creeps into the air, the students of Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry prepare for one of their most cherished traditions, the Festival of Lights and Legends. Held precisely on the night of the autumnal equinox, this celebration transforms the school grounds into a glowing theatre of enchantment and memory. The ceremony, said to date back to the early 1800s, is a tribute to the magic of North America, not just the spells and incantations, but the myths, the heroes, and the ancestral spirits that shaped the continent's magical identity. The origins of the festival are attributed to headmistress Josephine Calder, an ambitious witch of Shawnee descent who served during a transformative era for Ilvermorny. A passionate historian, Calder believed that the magic of the American continent was not merely in wands and potions, but in the stories passed down from one generation to another. She instituted the festival to honor those stories and to bridge the gap between native magical traditions and the growing body of wizarding students arriving from all corners of North America. Her vision was clear. Magic lives not only in books, but in memory, in performance, and in light. In preparation for the festival, students from all four houses, Thunderbird, Wampus, Horned Serpent, and Pukwudgie, spend weeks rehearsing elaborate performances. Each house selects a legend from magical North American lore and brings it to life through a dramatic reenactment. These aren't simple school plays. They are layered, magical spectacles filled with illusions, enchanted props, and ethereal soundscapes that echo through the night. A Thunderbird production once recreated the glowing ice caves of Nunavut with such precision that frost settled on the sleeves of the front row. Another year, Wampus students reenacted the tale of Ozawagosh, a legendary Ojibwe spellcaster who communed with storm spirits through songs sung only during eclipses. One of the most memorable performances in recent memory was staged in 2013 by the Horned Serpent House. They chose to depict the story of Magdalena Greaves, a colonial-era witch who allegedly discovered the hidden ruins of a magical Algonquin library beneath the roots of a 1,000-year-old elm. According to legend, Greaves was guided there by an enchanted white stag that only appeared during the equinox. The Horned Serpent students enchanted the entire grove outside the school's library, creating a living forest set that pulsed with magic. Trees moved, whispered, and glowed. For an entire hour, spectators watched in silence as the tale unfolded, ending with a breathtaking reveal. A glowing replica of the ancient library emerged from beneath the roots, inscribed with runes that shimmered in the moonlight. Once the performances conclude, the crowd gathers on the Moonstone Lawn, a circular meadow at the eastern slope of the campus, known for its unusually resonant, magical energy. There, in a moment of reverent silence, every student lights a floating orb using a spell that has been passed down for centuries, Lumen Cordis. The name translates as light of the heart, and it's said that the strength of one's intention influences the brightness and resilience of the orb. Each glowing sphere contains a single wish whispered into it before release, hopes for love, success, healing, or peace. These orbs are then released into the night sky, hundreds of them drifting upward in silent procession. Some rise quickly, disappearing into the stars. Others hover low, spinning gently like fireflies. And some, either through weak intention or troubled hearts, flicker and fade before they reach the treetops. Tradition holds that if your orb remains glowing until dawn, your wish will come true before the next equinox. It is both a comforting superstition and a test of inner clarity. In 1997, a Pukwudgie student named Claire Montrose, who had been struggling silently with grief after losing her brother in a potions accident, released an orb that glowed brighter than any in recent memory. Witnesses said it pulsed like a heartbeat as it rose, leaving behind a trail of golden mist. By morning, not only had the orb remained lit, but it had split into two, a phenomenon never seen before. That year, Claire recovered from her trauma, became top of her class, and went on to develop a groundbreaking potion for healing magical nerve damage. "The light never lies," Headmistress Agnetha Rosewood later remarked in her end-of-year speech. "Sometimes it shows us the parts of ourselves we forget still shine." The beauty of the festival lies in its dual nature. It is both spectacle and silence, performance and reflection. It reminds students that magic is not just about control, but about storytelling. Every light in the sky is a line in an unwritten poem. Every scene reenacted is a reclaimed history. It is a rare space in the magical world where Native American, colonial, and immigrant magical traditions coexist, not just in theory, but in lived memory. Although not featured in the core Harry Potter books, the Ilvermorny Festival was mentioned in the Magical Schools of the World, a supplementary guide used at the Department of Magical Education. In it, a brief but glowing note reads, "Of all the traditions at Ilvermorny, none surpass the Festival of Lights and Legends in both artistry and emotional resonance. It is as if the school sings to the stars." The author, magical historian Wilhelmina Porlock, visited the school in 1985 and witnessed the equinox celebration firsthand. She described it as a night of tears and awe where magic sheds its armor and becomes music. Over time, professors have become as invested in the festival as the students. Professor Raymond Kehoe of herbology once grew an entire garden of phosphorescent flora that formed part of the Pukwudgie legend performance about the guardians of the Great Swamp. His students wove through the luminous plants as part of a choreography that mimicked the movements of the ancient swamp spirits. The performance ended with the entire garden lifting into the air and dissolving into sparkling pollen, an illusion so powerful it was later replicated at a major wizarding conference in Toronto. Not every orb succeeds, not every performance dazzles, but even failure is cherished during the festival. In 2004, a first-year Wampus student, Edgar Lowe, forgot his lines entirely during a solo monologue about the Shoshone Firewalkers. He stood in frozen panic for what seemed like ages. But then the audience, led by upperclassmen, began to hum the tune of the Firewalker chant from the rehearsals. Edgar found his rhythm, improvised his lines, and ended with such conviction that his orb later became one of the few recorded to change color mid-flight, from soft blue to deep crimson, a color associated with courage in equinox lore. It is not uncommon for students to spend weeks planning what to whisper into their orbs. In 2010, a group of seventh years from different houses banded together and made a shared wish for unity, hoping to heal a recent rift that had formed over a Quidditch scandal. Their orbs linked in mid-air, forming a constellation-like shape that hovered over the school all night. The next morning, it was still there, gently rotating as if to say, "Some things deserve more than a wish. They demand action." Though the tradition is American, whispers of its magic have reached across the Atlantic. Beauxbatons has recently begun experimenting with similar ceremonies of light tied to seasonal solstices, and there are rumors that a few Hogwarts students once tried to replicate the orb spell. But according to Wandlore, Lumen Cordis only truly functions on Ilvermorny grounds where the ley lines intersect beneath Moonstone Lawn. It is said that the school itself breathes its magic into the orbs, and that is what gives them life. Perhaps the greatest truth of the festival lies in what Headmistress Josephine Calder once wrote in her personal journal. "Magic is memory, and memory is light. As long as we tell our stories and believe in our wishes, we will never walk in darkness." Her words are etched into a stone plaque at the edge of the Moonstone Lawn, where each year students gather wishing, remembering, and watching their hopes take flight into the star-speckled sky. Number 19, a library that changes for each student. The Ilvermorny Library was never meant to be just a building. Hidden in the northern wing of the castle, behind tall, arched doors carved with the sigils of the four houses, Horned Serpent, Wampus, Thunderbird, and Pukwudgie, it stood like a sentinel of knowledge, humming softly with ancient spells. Students often whispered that the air inside smelled not only of parchment and dust, but also of rain-soaked bark and ink brewed from starlight. The library, built by Iseult Sayre and enchanted by her husband James Stewart, had always been more than stone and wood. It was a living entity bonded to the school's soul. To step inside was not just to seek knowledge, it was to be weighed and measured by the magic itself. Catherine Moon, a sixth-year horned serpent with a particular talent for ancient runes, once entered the library in search of an obscure volume on pre-colonial wandcraft. She had barely crossed the threshold when the shelves began to groan softly, as if stirring from slumber. A narrow aisle opened between two towering bookcases, and a single tome floated down, landing gently in her hands. It was bound in black leather, etched with shifting silver characters. It wasn't what she asked for, but it was what she needed. "We do not always find the books we seek," Professor Nehemiah Grubb once wrote in his guide, The Ilvermorny Mind, "but in this place the books find us." The magic of the library had a peculiar rhythm. It was never the same twice. For some students, the northwestern corner housed a full archive on the Goblin rebellions of 1763, but for others it contained only blank tomes with flickering titles that faded the moment they were touched. The shelves had preferences, judgments even. Arthur Lennox, a third-year Thunderbird, once boasted of sneaking into the restricted section to find a grimoire on temporal displacement. The next day he returned to find the same hallway sealed off by a wall of glass, his reflection staring back, whispering verses he could not understand. He never found the grimoire again. But what fascinated most students wasn't the shifting arrangement of books. It was the way the library responded to need and readiness. Professor Whitaker, Ilvermorny's longtime librarian and a Pukwudgie alumna with silver hair and silent footsteps, once said, "The library is a mirror. It shows you what you carry within, sometimes too early, sometimes too late." She was the only person rumoured to have found the Hall of Forbidden Scrolls more than once. Most dismissed the legend as myth, a bedtime tale for aspiring curse-breakers. Yet too many students swore by the reality of it. The hall, it was said, only revealed itself once to each person, if at all, and only when the library deemed the seeker worthy. This was the experience of Madeline Bright, a quiet seventh year with a deep interest in spell architecture. She had no expectations when she entered the library during a thunderstorm, seeking solitude more than anything else. The lights flickered, and the very air seemed to hush. Then, without warning, the floor beneath her shifted, not violently, but as if it sighed. The shelf nearest to her groaned open like a door. Beyond it lay a narrow spiral staircase, lined with glowing glyphs. She descended, her heart pounding. What she found was not a room, but a chamber, circular and dimly lit, where scrolls hovered in mid-air like frozen birds. Some were tied with blood-red ribbon, others sealed in glass cases. She reached for one and immediately felt heat run up her arm, branding her with a mark that faded moments later. When she returned, the staircase was gone. She never spoke of what was written on the scroll. There was a book called Living Architecture, Sentient Structures of the Magical World by Sylvia Hartford, which detailed magical buildings with their own will. Of Ilvermorny's library, she wrote, "It is one of the rare institutions where knowledge is not just stored, but guarded, not against theft, but against premature understanding." The concept that a book could hide its content from unworthy eyes was not new in magical history, but a whole section of a library, even entire disciplines vanishing based on the reader's state of mind. That was Ilvermorny's mystery alone. Sometimes the library refused to reveal itself entirely. Jasper Crane, a fifth-year Wampus known for his impatience, once attempted to force open a locked cabinet with an unlocking charm. Not only did the spell backfire, but the entire row of shelves vanished for him for the remainder of the term. They remained visible to others. Some students even claimed the books inside giggled when Jasper walked past. He never saw them again, no matter how many apologies he whispered into the wood. Yet the library was not cruel. It rewarded persistence, curiosity, and most of all, humility. Olivia Reyes, a Pukwudgie first year from New Mexico, once got lost in the geography section and stumbled into a narrow alcove that didn't exist on the maps. She found a book written entirely in Nahuatl, her grandmother's tongue, filled with spells rooted in indigenous earth magic. The book glowed faintly when she held it, and the next day she received a note from Professor Whitaker. "Some books were waiting for you before you were born." The whispers were perhaps the strangest phenomenon. They came not from ghosts, but from the books themselves. Ilvermorny's students often described hearing their names murmured when standing before a shelf they had never visited before. Others claimed the books sang, not with voices but with vibrations like strings of a harp inside the walls. "The first time it happened, I thought someone was behind me," wrote Benedict Saul, a graduate of the Horned Serpent House, in a memoir he published years later. "But when I turned, the aisle was empty. Then I looked down and saw my name inscribed in golden ink on the spine of a book I had never seen before." The magic that governed the library seemed to evolve alongside its students. Each year, new books appeared, old ones disappeared, and entire subjects shifted across the halls. Sometimes a corridor would open for one house and remain locked to another. No one knew if it was the enchantments or something older, perhaps even older than the founders themselves. There were whispers, too, of a guardian. Not a creature, but a presence that could be felt. An old rhythm, a rustle in the pages before you opened them. Many believed this guardian was the soul of the library itself, shaped by every student who had passed through. During the midwinter season of 1911, a fire broke out in the astronomy tower. Flames were said to reach the northern wing. Yet the library remained untouched, though scorch marks could be seen around the entrance. The explanation was never officially given, but students speculated that the library had shielded itself. One letter from a student named Clara Beaufort read, "We thought it would burn, but when the smoke cleared, the doors stood closed and cool. It was as though the fire had been repelled by breath." Then there was the tale of the empty book. Many saw it as a joke, a blank tome that floated down from time to time and landed with a heavy thud. Its pages were void of text. Yet those who opened it under moonlight, with honest intention and a question in their hearts, often claimed to see ink begin to form. Answers, riddles, sometimes even warnings. No two students ever saw the same writing. Some saw predictions, others saw memories that weren't their own. Ilvermorny never revealed whether the Hall of Forbidden Scrolls truly existed. No map marked it. No professor acknowledged it beyond vague shrugs or cryptic smiles. But there was a corridor behind the northern tapestry, a tapestry of a serpent swallowing its own tail, that students were warned to avoid. It was always locked. Yet on rare occasions it was seen ajar, and a faint light flickered within. Perhaps the most unnerving story came from Walter Bishop, a seventh year in 1943 who disappeared for 3 days. When he returned, his robes were covered in dust and his eyes had changed colour, from hazel to silver. He never explained where he had gone, only muttering, "The library showed me what it didn't want to." He graduated with top marks in every subject, but never pursued a ministry career. Instead, he vanished into the forests of Vermont and was never seen again. The Ilvermorny Library continued its quiet work, folding time and space to guard its secrets. It changed shape with the seasons, its walls breathing with enchantment. Those who entered had to come with honesty and readiness, for knowledge at Ilvermorny was not a gift, it was a test, and the library waited, patient and eternal, for those brave enough to pass. Number 20. The Fountain of Three Spells. The Fountain of the Three Spells stands like a silent guardian in the heart of Ilvermorny's main courtyard, surrounded by the austere, grey stone walls of the castle. Its bronze basin, deeply engraved with swirling runes of European and Native American origin, has stood unweathered for centuries. Snow piles gently on the courtyard cobbles around it in winter, but never touches the basin's rim. The water that bubbles within is warm, even in the cruel January winds that sweep down from the mountains of Massachusetts. The founders called it Enchanted. The students call it miraculous. James Stewart, one of the two founders of Ilvermorny, created the fountain during the early years of the school's construction. He was not a born wizard, but a nomage who had learned magic through his wife, Isolde Serre. When he shaped the first spellstones of the basin, it was said he used tears from a dream. The dream of creating a sanctuary for magical children far from the prejudices of the old world. Stewart, a man of deep feeling and meticulous care, crafted a spell not for power, but for growth. That's what the magic does. It amplifies not the spell, but the spirit behind it. That's why it only enhances the first 3 spells after a student has washed their face in its waters. It strengthens what the caster is becoming, not just what they wish to do. The school's archives record the earliest known instance of the fountain's golden mist. It occurred in 1783 during the exam week of a Thunderbird House student named Eliza Markel. A quiet girl with an affinity for air charms, she had been overlooked by teachers and peers alike until the day she stepped up to the fountain, trembling with nerves, and let its waters touch her cheeks. Moments later, when she cast her Levioso charm on a heavy marble desk, the object soared not just a few inches, but floated gracefully through the examination hall like a feather caught in a breeze. The proctors gasped. Then, in the courtyard, the fountain released a shimmer. Golden droplets suspended mid-air, as though time itself had stopped. It drifted down like pollen in sunlight. Eliza had changed. And the fountain had witnessed it. The faculty understands the power of the fountain, and so the rule was put in place, no more than once per week, per student. It's not just a matter of fairness. The magic is delicate. It's not meant to be a crutch. Headmistress Agatha Thorne, who served from 1949 to 1962, once wrote in her correspondence, "The fountain of the 3 spells is not an ally in ambition, but a mirror for the soul's direction. Those who use it for gain will find their own reflection clouded." Her letter was quoted in the school's ethics curriculum for decades. In the winter term of 2003, the courtyard was covered in snow. Students shuffled between classes, scarves pulled high over red noses, boots crunching the powder. On the morning of the Advanced Charms final, a line of students from all 4 houses snaked silently across the courtyard, all waiting their turn at the basin. Among them was a Wampus 5th year named Jonah Feld. Known more for his Quidditch skills than his spell work, Jonah was rumoured to be on the edge of failing the course. He washed his face, muttered a silent hope, and marched into the exam chamber. Witnesses say he began with a simple lumos. The light that burst from his wand was bright enough to draw gasps. He followed it with a protego charm that rebounded 3 hexes cast by his examiner. The third was a complicated conjunctivitis curse, which he cast with such precision that Professor Winslow reportedly dropped her clipboard. When he exited, the air outside smelled of something warm, cinnamon and oak. Behind him, the fountain exhaled gold again. Jonah passed with distinction and was later chosen to lead a special field unit in magical wildlife rescue. The magic of the fountain isn't indiscriminate. There are students who wash their faces, whisper spells, and find no trace of change. But when it works, when it truly connects with the essence of the caster, something ancient stirs in the air. The enhancement of spells is not raw amplification, it's refinement. One professor described it as a perfect tuning of a violin string that was always slightly off. The water realigns a student with their own potential, not with borrowed strength. Some magical historians have argued that the fountain's origins go deeper than Steward's enchantment. According to the book Forgotten Foundations of Ilvermorny, written by alumnus Owen Redfeather, the site where the fountain was built lies on a natural confluence of ley lines, channels of magical energy that some believe enhance or distort spells. Redfeather claims that the surrounding stone even contains fragments of thunderbolt quartz, a volatile crystal known to interact with magical emotion. Whether or not Steward knew this, or if the land itself was drawn to his vision, is still debated. In 1987, a Pukwudgie girl named Harmony Knott used the fountain in secret more than once in a week. She had always struggled with her confidence and had failed several exams in a row. Desperate, she returned to the fountain 3 nights in succession. On the 4th day, her wand exploded during a simple reparo charm. She was unharmed, but her wand was ruined beyond repair. Headmaster Torvald Rue summoned her and warned her that the fountain was not a well of wishes. "It is a contract," he said, "between your true self and your intentions. If one is false, the other breaks." The Golden Mist has become almost a sacred event. Students who witness it fall silent, unsure whether to cheer or pray. The mist doesn't always fall during exams. Sometimes it appears after a casual practice or in moments of emotional clarity. One of the most moving instances occurred in 2012 when a transfer student from Uganda, Nyasha Mutisi, performed a spell to speak with the spirits of the dead, a difficult and sensitive charm. She had lost both her parents in an accident and had not spoken of them since arriving. That morning, after washing in the fountain, she succeeded. When the fountain misted, it did so with such intensity that a ring of warmth stayed in the courtyard for 2 days, melting the surrounding snow in perfect circles. In the student-written publication, the Ilvermorny Inkwell, essays often appear speculating on the origin of the fountain's behaviour. Some believe it is sentient, others argue it is merely reactive, a barometer of transformation, not a force that causes it. But one article, published anonymously in 1999, said it best: "The fountain does not make you better. It reminds you that you already are." Professors discourage dependency on the fountain, warning that it can foster complacency. "Not every great spell needs golden water," said Charms Master Yvette Drouin during the 2015 orientation. "And not every transformation is visible. Sometimes the most important spell is believing you can cast one at all." She later revealed that she had never used the fountain during her student years and had still graduated top of her class. The enchantment only strengthens the first 3 spells. Students sometimes rehearse for hours beforehand, Planning the order, practicing the pronunciation, the pressure is enormous. In 1974, a Thunderbird student named Nathaniel Glass tried to game the system by using silent spells first, then performing his real charms after. But the magic didn't respond. The fountain somehow knew which spells he meant. The third was all it gave him. The rest was his own. Despite the rule, some students have tried to bottle the water. None have succeeded. It goes flat within minutes, becoming ordinary water. The enchantment exists only at the fountain, possibly tied to the runes etched into its structure. These runes, still untranslated, are thought to be a blend of ancient Irish ogham and tribal spell symbols, native to the northeast woodlands tribes. It's a fusion, just like the school itself, of cultures, faiths, and magic woven together. Every spring, as exams return and anxiety ripples through the corridors, the line at the fountain begins anew. Wands are polished, faces are washed, hopes are whispered into the steam, and every now and then, when someone has truly become something new, the air sparkles, the gold mist rises, and Ilvermorny remembers. Number 21, the Song of the Four Beasts. Every year, on the anniversary of Ilvermorny's founding, the great hall is bathed in a hushed, reverent glow. Candles float motionless, and the vast mountain winds outside seem to pause, as though the very air is waiting. It is on this day that the most cherished tradition in all of North American magical education takes place. The Song of the Four Beasts. It is not merely a performance, it is an act of remembrance, of identity, of invisible threads that tie each witch and wizard to their house, their founders, and the wild, untamed forces of magical nature. Written over 3 centuries ago by Chadwick and Webster Booth, sons of Ilvermorny's founder, Iseult Sayre, the Song of the Four Beasts has been passed down with extraordinary care. The twins were gifted in different ways, Chadwick with a scholarly mind and a wand of horned serpent horn, and Webster with a passionate spirit and the heart of a warrior. Together they channeled their love for their school into this enchanted composition. It is not known whether they used traditional spellcraft or ancient American enchantments, but the magic that lives in the song is palpable. During its performance, statues of Thunderbird, Wampus, Pukwudgie, and Horned Serpent shimmer with life, glowing faintly as if stirred from slumber. The first notes begin softly, almost imperceptibly. The melody is ancient, haunting, not quite human. The lead singer is always a 7th-year student, chosen weeks in advance. This honor is second only to being named head prefect. As the song begins, a low vibration spreads through the floor, and the carved beasts lining the 4 walls come alive. It is not theatrical illusion. Those who have stood in that room, faculty and students alike, swear they have felt the statues breathe. Their eyes glisten, their chests rise and fall. The magic here is older than we are, Professor Eulalie Pickett once said, her voice trembling slightly after a performance. It recognizes loyalty, it rewards memory. During the performance, the entire hall becomes wrapped in a field of sound and spirit. No spell is spoken, but the enchantment takes hold nonetheless. Pukwudgie's carved stone body leans forward, and its eyes scan the students as though seeking a kindred soul. The Wampus flexes its carved shoulders, its mouth curled into a proud snarl. The horned serpent's coils shift slightly, as if gliding through unseen waters. The Thunderbird spreads its wings wide, casting enormous shadows across the ceiling. There is a moment in the song, always precisely at the 27th measure, where the aura intensifies. For just a heartbeat, every student in the hall feels an unmistakable pull toward one of the 4 statues. Some describe it as a gust of wind, others as a warmth in the chest, a tug at the spine. But the older the student, the stronger the sensation. 7th years in particular often report an overwhelming feeling of alignment, as if the beast they were chosen by at age 11 is whispering to them again, reaffirming their belonging. This magical resonance has inspired countless theories over the centuries. Some say the beasts choose students more than once at the sorting ceremony, and again each year, reminding them that their journey is not over. In 1923, a student named Dorothea Crane reportedly fainted during the performance. When revived, she wept openly, claiming she had seen the Thunderbird weep with her. Her peers mocked her for weeks until headmistress Agatha Fontaine confirmed that the enchantments in the Great Hall do indeed grow more sensitive when students are on the cusp of significant magical breakthroughs. One of the most extraordinary examples of this phenomenon occurred in 1967. Elijah Whittaker, a sixth-year Pukwudgie, had been quietly planning to transfer to a European school. He never truly felt at home at Ilvermorny. During that year's performance of the song, the Pukwudgie statue's eyes reportedly glowed brighter than ever before, casting a beam of soft gold light directly upon Elijah. Witnesses said it was as though the statue had chosen him all over again. Elijah stayed. 2 years later, he became Ilvermorny's youngest ever potions master. The words of the song themselves are rarely published. They are protected by Ilvermorny's traditions and only known to those who attend or graduate. However, the first line is inscribed in Elder Futhark runes on the inner arch of the Great Hall. In thunder's cry, in serpent's dream, in wampus strength and trickster gleam. Those words, sung at full voice during the performance, carry through every stone and window pane of the school. Birds have been seen taking flight from the surrounding peaks at that very moment, as if startled by the crescendo of ancient magic. One of the few written accounts comes from a 19th century visitor, a British scholar named Clementine Highcastle. In her travel journal, Wand Beyond Albion, she describes the performance as follows: "I have never heard anything like it, not at Hogwarts, not in the French court of Beaubaton, nor even in the wailing ballads of the Saharan viziers. The beasts do not move, yet they do. The air itself bends." I stood near the statue of the horned serpent, and when its name was sung, my entire body went cold and then strangely light, as though I might be dreaming within a memory I never had. Despite its age, the melody has been preserved with great care. Magical archivists at the school guard the original manuscript written by Chadwick in enchanted ink that resists fading, theft, and fire. The notes shimmer on the parchment as if alive. Only 2 copies exist, one kept in the Ilvermorny Library under protective charm, and another sealed in a vault beneath the New York Macusa branch. Any attempt to copy it causes the text to vanish and reappear only to its original guardian. Students preparing to perform the song undergo weeks of training. They are not merely rehearsing notes, they must attune themselves to the emotional magic embedded in the melody. Only those in full alignment with their beast may carry its verse. If a Thunderbird student attempts to sing the wampus verse, their voice falters, the note collapses. It is not punishment, but incompatibility. The school's spellwork ensures each line is carried by a heart that understands it. One year, in 1985, a tragedy struck just days before the performance. The lead singer, Talia Reid, fell ill and lost her voice entirely. Panic swept the school. In desperation, her housemate, a quiet third year named Simon Gauthier, volunteered to take her place. Most believed it would be a disaster, but Simon, a wampus, sang with such raw emotion that students claimed the wampus statue roared, a low, echoing sound that shook the floor. Headmaster Everett Muldoon wrote in his private notes, "The beast spoke tonight, not in words, but it spoke." The tradition persists, unbroken even through times of war and scandal. During the dark years of the Rappaport laws, when secrecy strangled magical culture in America, the song was performed in silence behind heavy curtains. No guests were allowed, yet even then the statues moved, and the seventh years cried, not from fear, but from the unbearable pride of being part of something older than the laws of men. Perhaps most remarkable is the effect the song has on those about to graduate. In their final year, with careers and futures looming ahead, the Song of the Four Beasts becomes a farewell. Not a goodbye to the school, but to the childlike belief that houses are just buildings and beasts are just mascots. The seventh years know better. They have seen the glow in the statue's eyes. They have heard the tone of ancient voices beneath the melody. And in those final verses, they sing not as students, but as inheritors. Even the walls remember. One section of stone near the Wampus statue bears a faint imprint, not carved, but stained into the surface, where the beast's paw once rested, they say. After the great quake of 1842, no spell could wash it away. The stain remains, just as the song remains, unchanged, unbroken, unforgettable. Number 22, outdoor, classes in magical nature. On a misty September morning, the students of Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry gathered near the edge of the Greylock forest, their robes fluttering gently in the breeze. The first leaves of autumn had just begun to turn, setting the treetops ablaze with gold and crimson. It was the beginning of a new term, but unlike the stone halls and ancient towers of European magical schools, Ilvermorny favoured something quite different. Lessons were not confined within walls or cloistered in candlelit rooms. Instead, magic was taught under the open sky, where wind and earth, water and fire were not abstract elements in a textbook, but living, breathing forces. Professor Agnes Windsparrow, a Wampus graduate known for her affinity with elemental magic, led her third-year students to a glade where sunlight poured in through the trees like liquid gold. There, the lesson on elemental spells would begin. The students formed a circle around a ring of smoothed river stones, each stone etched with runes that shimmered faintly in the morning light. Agnes tapped her wand once against the ground, and a low hum vibrated through the air. "The earth is awake," she told her students, her voice carried by the breeze, "and it listens better when you stand upon it, not above it." It was not a metaphor. In Ilvermorny, spells rooted in nature responded more powerfully when cast in their native environments. One of the school's most respected traditions involved the use of natural elements as magical foci. Instead of always relying on manufactured wands, students were encouraged to work with local materials to deepen their bond with their surroundings. For a charm to calm a raging fire elemental, Professor Windsparrow might hand out maple leaves gathered at dawn. These leaves, imbued with dew and intention, focused magical intent in a way that even the finest dragon heartstring core could not replicate. The belief was simple but profound. The earth is not a passive stage for magic, it is an active participant. At the base of Mount Greylock, the air grew thinner and cooler. There, Professor Nathaniel Crow taught spirit communication to fourth years. Lessons began at dusk and stretched into the deep indigo hours of night. Candles were not used. Instead, students learned to attune their vision to the subtle glow of spirit lights, which danced just above the ferns and moss. A student named Clara Wensley, a thunderbird known for her sharp instincts, once saw the shape of a white deer emerge from the shadows, only to vanish the moment she tried to focus on it. "You do not call spirits to you," Professor Crow often said. "You meet them halfway where silence lives." Ilvermorny's approach contrasted sharply with other magical schools like Durmstrang or Beauxbatons, where control and precision were emphasized above all. At Ilvermorny, a certain humility was required. One did not master magic so much as participate in it, and nature was considered the oldest and wisest teacher. Professor Crow, who came from a long line of Cherokee mystics, insisted that spiritual magic must never be extracted from the land. It had to be asked for, invited, and honored. He taught his students to bring offerings, pine cones, feathers, or small jars of spring water. Magic responds to respect, he reminded them. And respect is a language best spoken without words. Among the more memorable lessons at Ilvermorny was the annual fifth-year project in enchantment, supervised by Professor Delphina Moss, who had once served as a magizoologist in the wilds of Vermont. Students would spend 3 weeks crafting protective wards on stones found along the nearby lake's edge. These stones, polished smooth by generations of tides, became amulets, warding off everything from negative energy to minor curses. Delphina's favourite story was of Ezra Pike, a Pukwoodgi student who enchanted a stone using only lake water, and his grandmother's lullaby. That amulet later deflected a misfired hex during a duel, humming softly as it did so. The magical creatures of the Ilvermorny grounds also played a unique role in outdoor education. Bowtruckles from the elder groves often observed herbology classes, their needle-like fingers twitching whenever a student approached a tree with disrespect. Salamanders nested in volcanic stones near the school's southern cliffs, and their presence made fire spell practice unpredictable but thrilling. There was even a rumoured thunderbird nest high above the clouds, its feathers sometimes found scattered across the plateau after storms. "Each creature is a keeper of an unseen lesson," said Headmistress Viridiana Hemlock, who herself had once bonded with a thunderbird after a lightning strike split her wand in two. Magic involving crystals was also deeply embedded in the Ilvermorny curriculum. In a particularly revered 6th-year course, students would bury moon-charged crystals beneath the soil a week before the full moon. On the night of the full moon, under Professor Lysandra Fenn's supervision, they would return to extract them and channel the amplified energy into transmutation spells. No classroom could reproduce the sensation of holding a crystal pulsing with the mountain's latent magic. "The land remembers," Professor Fenn said in her yearly lecture. "What you bury is not forgotten. Magic nourishes in secret before it shines in daylight." Students spoke often of the enchantment class held at the Lake of Mist, a silent, glassy expanse of water hidden beyond a narrow path, only visible during sunrise. Here, magic was taught in whispers. The mist was thick and intelligent, reacting to spells with subtle colours: pink for joy, silver for wisdom, deep blue for sorrow. One student, Hallie Trencher, famously cast a protection spell that turned the mist golden. It was the only time that colour had ever been recorded, and no one, not even the teachers, could explain it. The record remains etched in the Hall of Mysteries, with Hallie's name glowing faintly beneath a carving of the lake. The practice of enchantment at Ilvermorny leaned heavily on local law. Students learned that certain roots only revealed their magical properties under a waxing moon, and that soil taken from the north slope of the mountain had different properties than that from the south. Spells were more than incantations. They were relationships between the caster and the land. It was not unusual for students to spend days preparing for a single spell, gathering pine sap, sketching sigils in bark, or sleeping under the stars to dream of the spell's outcome before casting it. One of the most sacred outdoor spaces was the Circle of 12 Stones, a ring of boulders carved centuries ago by Ilvermorny's founders. Here, the veil between the mundane and magical thinned. Professor Emeritus Quentin Rains used to bring advanced students here for meditation, asking them to focus not on casting spells but on hearing the spells the earth had already cast. "The wind is full of lessons," he would say. "You just have to be quiet long enough to hear them." Rains was known to sit there for hours, unmoving, listening. Perhaps the most profound moment in every Ilvermorny student's journey came during the Silent March, a tradition that took place during the winter solstice. All students would trek barefoot to the peak of Mount Greylock before dawn, carrying only a wand and a pouch of salt. There, in the icy silence of the mountaintop, each student was to cast one spell, a single gesture that reflected their deepest understanding of magic. Some conjured warmth, others summoned ancestral visions, a few let their wands rest, doing nothing at all. Every choice was honoured. Books, of course, were not absent from Ilvermorny. The Grand Library was as vast and ancient as any in the wizarding world, but even there, some volumes required their readers to read beneath moonlight or among tree roots to reveal their secrets. One text, the Whispering Codex, could only be opened if read with one hand pressed to living soil. Magic is not only knowledge, the librarian once said, it is context. A spell read by firelight means something different when read by starlight. Ilvermorny's outdoor magic extended to its architecture as well. The classrooms themselves were often open-roofed, with ivy-covered arches and enchanted weather domes that mimicked the sky's mood, but never interfered with learning. Birds frequently joined transfiguration classes, sometimes perching on students' shoulders mid-spell. It was not uncommon to have a lecture interrupted by a passing herd of moon deer or the rustle of spirit foxes in the underbrush. These interruptions were never scolded, they were welcomed. In her memoir, Roots of Sky and Spell, Headmistress Hemlock reflected, Ilvermorny was never built to stand apart from the world, it was built to kneel beside it. She described her own formative moment as a student, casting her first elemental spell beside a waterfall. I remember feeling insignificant, she wrote, and that was the first time I truly felt powerful. That paradox of humility leading to strength remains at the heart of Ilvermorny's philosophy. Even visiting professors from other schools found themselves awed by the practice. A guest from Mahutukoro once remarked that he had never seen such reverence for the land within a magical institution. Here, he said, students do not bend nature to their will, they ask it to dance. In a world where magic can so easily be twisted into power, Ilvermorny teaches its students something else, to listen, to kneel in the moss, to wait for the wind, to understand that true magic is not just cast, it is grown, and for that there is no better classroom than the earth itself. Number 23, the Room of Confessions. They call it the Confession Room, though no professor at Ilvermorny ever mentions it. It's not on any official map, not listed among the school's many secrets and oddities passed down through generations. Yet every student knows it exists. Not from lectures or handbooks, but from whispers in the dormitories, from the half-nervous, half-reverent stories told late at night when candles flicker low. They say the room does not reside in any fixed wing of the castle, nor does it follow the logic of staircases or corridors. It appears when it is needed, and never a moment sooner. The first time anyone truly believes in the room is usually after they've heard about someone who returned from it. Changed. There's no grand tale of magic performed or monsters defeated. It's always quieter than that. Jules Nanticoke went there after the Thunderbird duel, someone will say. Came back and dropped out of the dueling club the next day, said he had some thinking to do. Others just disappear for a few hours, reappear with red-rimmed eyes and a curious peace clinging to them like the scent of rain after a storm. That's when others start to look for it themselves, not out of curiosity, but because something inside them aches too much to ignore. The confession room is not punishment, it is not judgment, it is not even comfort in the traditional sense. When the door finally appears, always unremarkable in shape and colour, it invites without forcing. Some stand before it for hours before turning the handle, and inside always the same. Soft light like sunrise through thin curtains, silence that's not empty but watchful, and a mirror. The mirror is old with a silvery surface that does not reflect skin or bone, no nose, no eyes, no hair. Instead, it captures something else entirely, the soul, the essence of who the person has become. In that still image, students have seen arrogance radiating like a foul glow. Others have seen flickers of hope, pain buried beneath pride, or even regret curling around their shoulders like smoke. But the most disturbing reflections are the ones where they see nothing at all. A hollowness where identity should have grown, and then, always, a voice. It does not come from the walls nor from the mirror, but seems to echo softly inside the bones of the listener. It asks one question: who have you become at Ilvermorny? It's not a riddle, not a test. There is no right answer, and yet it demands honesty. Some try to speak aloud, others don't say a word, but all must face themselves, and when they do, the spell is complete. That confrontation cannot be undone. In the autumn of 1913, a student named Beatrice Graves disappeared for 3 days. She was a Pukwudgie, brilliant with healing charms, but brittle as cracked glass. From pressure no one could quite identify. She'd failed her transfiguration exam, and the rumor was she'd been seen wandering the East Wing in the early morning. When she returned, no one recognized her immediately. Her posture was softer, the lines around her mouth gentler. She walked directly to the headmistress and apologized for plagiarizing an essay months ago, something no one had ever discovered. Then she hugged her roommate, something Beatrice had never done before. The school never asked where she had been. They didn't need to. Decades later, a horned serpent named Edwin Wolfe entered the confession room with a secret so heavy he was nearly broken beneath it. He had used a forbidden memory charm on another student during a duel, erased a moment of fear to win a bet. No one had found out. The boy never remembered. But Edwin knew. The mirror showed him the weight he had carried ever since. The manipulation carved into his soul like a scar. When the voice asked its question, he couldn't answer. He simply cried. When he left the room, he went straight to Professor Cardwin and confessed. That same year, he left Ilvermorny, became a wand-maker's apprentice, and never cast memory spells again. He died old and respected, but his journals revealed he never forgot the mirror. Ilvermorny's founders never mentioned the confession room, at least not publicly. Isolde Sayre's writings make vague references to spaces of reflection conjured by need, but these are usually interpreted as metaphor. Yet students across generations know its presence. The castle listens, as the saying goes. It knows when you're ready. The room is not about penance, it is about becoming. In 1967, the confession room became legend for an entirely different reason. A girl named Marisol Withershank was struggling under the expectations of being a Thunderbird. Daring, brave, adventurous. But Marisol wasn't brave. She feared thunderstorms, she avoided heights, she never spoke in class. When the room appeared to her, it was in the west corridor near the astronomy tower, a place she normally avoided. Her reflection in the mirror was not timid, nor was it bold. It was balanced, thoughtful. Quiet strength radiated from her image, and she finally understood. Bravery was not about noise, it was about persistence. She walked out and switched houses, something almost never done. Ilvermorny allowed it without question. The room asks for no witnesses, it provides no proof. And yet it changes lives. Once, a boy named Lucien Proud had bullied half his class into silence. A wampus through and through, he was charismatic, athletic, and utterly feared. One day, he returned from the room and stopped laughing. He apologized. Slowly, he began writing anonymous letters of apology to every student he'd hurt. Some forgave him, some didn't, but none could say he was the same boy. Years later, he returned to Ilvermorny as a counselor, the first in school history. Some believe the mirror is enchanted by the founders. Others say it's tied to the North American ley lines that run through the school grounds, reacting to emotional imbalance. But those who have seen it never question its origin. As one graduate, Luann Starcloud, wrote in her memoir, "There's no need to know who created the room. It was not made. It is." No one has ever claimed to have entered the room twice. Some say it will not open for those who have already answered its question. Others believe once you've seen yourself fully, there's no need to look again. But everyone agrees. It appears only when you're ready, or when you've run out of time to pretend. Occasionally, professors catch wind of a student changing overnight. A sudden burst of honesty in essays, a public apology, a volunteer helping the first years without reason. They exchange knowing looks but never speak of it aloud. The magic of the confession room depends on its mystery. Once explained, it might vanish. And so Ilvermorny lets it be. The room is not in the books. Not even the magical architecture of Ilvermorny by Temulon Blackridge, which charts every known secret staircase and hidden passage, mentions it. But the room isn't for books, it's for the heart. That's why students remember it decades later, not as a place, but as a moment. A still point in the chaos of growing up magical, when the walls between who they are and who they pretend to be are finally stripped away. Even today, if you wander the corridors of Ilvermorny alone, with something clawing inside you, a guilt, a question, a need, you might see a door that wasn't there yesterday. It won't call out to you, it won't flash or glow, but it will be waiting, just the same. And if you go inside, you'll find the mirror, and the voice, and the question that has echoed through time, unchanged. Who have you become at Ilvermorny? And perhaps, like those before you, you'll come back lighter, or perhaps you'll change forever. Number 24, the Enchanted Artifact Workshop. Beneath the north wing of Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry lies a place cloaked in secrecy and humming with ancient magic, a workshop so infused with power that it seems to breathe with the pulse of enchantment itself. Known simply as the Master's Workshop among the few who are permitted to speak of it, this hidden chamber was founded over 3 centuries ago by none other than Chadwick Boot, one of the school's 4 legendary founders. It is said that he carved the first rune into its stone threshold with a blade tipped in starlight and bathed in potion-brewed moon water, sealing the room not with doors but with intention. To this day, only students who have demonstrated not just proficiency but excellence in both rune engineering and the elusive course of spell durability are allowed access. The workshop is no ordinary classroom. Vaulted ceilings ripple with protective charms, runic diagrams pulse faintly across the walls, and glass cabinets float along the edges of the chamber containing artifacts so volatile they can only be observed under enchanted veils. There are workstations engraved with intricate sigils, each tuned to the magical resonance of its assigned student. The centerpiece of the room is a circular dais made of serpentinite, where the legendary Gordian knot brooch rests, an object that has not moved in 300 years. Crafted by Chadwick himself, it is a mass of intertwining silver and iron that forms a magical paradox. The knot cannot be untied, yet it hums with potential energy, reacting subtly to those who step near it. Chadwick Boot, though remembered widely for his dueling prowess and scholarly treatises on European hexcraft, found his deepest fascination in the crafting of magical tools. According to the school's preserved scrolls, Chadwick believed that magic, when embedded into objects, could outlive the wizard and affect the world long after a spell had faded. His personal notes, compiled in The Lasting Hand, Notes on Object Enchantment, describe his philosophy clearly. The wand channels will, but the artifact remembers it. In founding the workshop, he hoped to create a tradition of magical artisanship that would rival any wizarding invention in Europe or Asia. Among Ilvermorny's most celebrated graduates is Miriam Wensdale, a 19th-century inventor who created the Echo Medallion, a protective charm that reflects any spell cast at the wearer with twice the original force. Her prototype, first forged in the Master's Workshop, was said to be flawed, until she accidentally triggered the medallion in frustration and watched her own stupefy ricochet back with the power of a thunderclap. Her innovation changed battlefield enchantments forever, and her descendants still run Wensdale Wards, a protective gear company headquartered in Boston. Another notable artifact born within the workshop's walls is the Lumisalve capsule, invented by Eduardo Blanchet in 1923. These small, potion-infused orbs release healing vapors when cracked open, often used on the field by American auras. Though Blanchet never became a household name, his invention is now standard issue among magical law enforcement. A plaque bearing his name hangs beside his original workstation in the workshop, etched with the words, he healed a nation one capsule at a time. The requirements for entry into the workshop remain strict. Beyond earning top marks in rune engineering, a course notorious for its demanding final project involving the animation of a runic creature, students must also excel in spell durability, a discipline that explores how to embed, maintain, and protect enchantments over time. Professor Elspeth Tramble, who has overseen spell durability since 1998, refers to the workshop as a crucible of patience and brilliance. You cannot lie to an artifact. It either holds the spell or shatters. Tramble herself was once a student of the workshop and still wears the whisper bracelet she crafted there, an object that allows its wearer to hear the last words spoken in any room they enter, provided it was said with emotion. Current head of artifact studies, Professor Vernon Creel, oversees student entries into the workshop and rarely approves more than 2 or 3 per year. His office is filled with failed objects, rings that leak memories, combs that try to escape, cloaks that unravel under moonlight, all collected as warnings. Yet even Creel cannot hide his awe when he speaks of the brooch. It's older than any wand on campus. It reacts to anger. It hums when truth is spoken. No one's ever unlocked its full magic, and that's the point. It reminds the students that even the most gifted minds can only scratch the surface. There are legends, of course, about the brooch. Some claim that the knot in its center shifts ever so slightly each decade, as though waiting for the right spell to undo it. Others believe it's not meant to be opened, but rather serves as a magical lock, holding back something too dangerous to be released. One popular theory among the students is that Chadwick bound a prophecy into the brooch's weave, one that will only activate when Ilvermorny faces its greatest threat. No official source confirms any of these stories, but the school has never denied them either. The workshop's atmosphere is one of quiet reverence. No talking is allowed once the rune fires are lit. Students work in synchronized silence, broken only by the occasional magical vibration or the fizz of a failed spell escaping containment. The space smells of silver shavings, dragon ash, and the deep mineral scent of enchanted stone. Each apprentice is paired with a wandless project, meant to teach them the art of latent magic, how to embed intention without channeling it directly. As Professor Tramble says, wands are tools of the moment, artifacts are messages to the future. Some of the workshop's most fascinating ongoing projects remain incomplete. A mirror that shows not your reflection, but your reputation. A locket that slowly absorbs lies told within 20 feet. A pair of boots that teleport to the last place you felt joy. Each is a marvel of craftsmanship, half-finished, teetering on the edge between brilliance and danger. They are preserved on floating pedestals, slowly rotating under sheets of woven light. Their creators have either graduated or, in a few cases, been expelled for reckless magical combinations. One such cautionary tale is that of Thomas Penwither, expelled in 1964 after his experimental artifact, a jar designed to trap voices and replay them as musical notes, accidentally induced hysteria in the school's West Wing. His jar remains in a glass case, perpetually humming a lullaby in a voice that changes depending on who listens. Some professors believe the artifact became sentient, others think it's simply haunted by Penwither's guilt. The workshop has also become a spiritual haven for many. Students often speak of entering the room and immediately sensing a shift in energy, as though the chamber exists slightly out of phase with the rest of the school. It is not uncommon for clocks to run slower inside, letters left overnight on the work tables sometimes return in the morning with words added, phrases no one remembers writing. Whether this is due to ambient magic or lingering enchantments by the founders remains a mystery. In 2012, during a brief excavation for new ventilation systems, workers discovered a hidden door beneath the workshop's floor. It led to a narrow corridor filled with stone shelves and decayed scrolls. Among them was a small, sealed envelope addressed in Chadwick Booth's own handwriting, marked with the crest of the Horned Serpent House. The headmistress at the time, Constance Pike, declared the envelope too unstable to open, and had it reburied beneath the workshop with protective wards. But the very existence of the letter reignited theories about Chadwick's final project, an artifact too powerful to trust even to future generations. Despite its secrets, or perhaps because of them, the Master's workshop continues to inspire. Every year, a new handful of students steps inside and leaves changed. They speak less, listen more, and carry the weight of knowledge few others can understand. To enter the workshop is to step into a living archive of ambition, failure, brilliance, and restraint. It is the silent heart of Ilvermorny, pulsing with the echoes of spells that were meant to last centuries. And in its center, the knot remains, watching, waiting, whispering. Number 25, the Gallery of Lost Wands. In the eastern tower of Ilvermorny, tucked between the spiraling staircases and whispering stone walls, lies the Gallery of Lost Wands, a room unlike any other in the North American school of witchcraft and wizardry. Bathed in filtered twilight from stained glass windows, the gallery seems frozen in time. Rows of delicate glass cases line the room, each containing a wand resting on crimson velvet. Above each wand, a nameplate glints softly, etched with gold lettering that names the wand's owner and provides a brief but often chilling account of their fate. It is not a place where students linger for long. Some come once in their 7 years and never again. Others dare not enter at all. Each wand is more than just a magical instrument. It is a relic of a life lived, sometimes cut short, sometimes vanished without trace. The gallery is often hushed, the air heavy with memory. Professors say the silence is not mere respect, it is magic. The wands, too closely bound to the souls of their lost masters, hum with lingering enchantments. Students have whispered that the longer you remain, the more you feel them watching, not with malevolence, but with a yearning that brushes the edge of fear. No one knows exactly how many wands lie behind the glass now. The records are incomplete, some of them intentionally redacted, but one thing is certain, none of these wands may be touched. The prohibition is not just a school rule, it is a safeguard. A story passed down through generations tells of Eleanor Finch, a bright and curious Thunderbird student from the class of 1849. Eleanor was known for her insatiable love of ancient magic, often seen with her nose buried in forgotten tomes and obscure magical theories. One evening, drawn by tales of the gallery, she snuck in after curfew. There, among the moonlit rows, she saw a wand softly pulsing with golden light. The plaque beneath it read, "Agnes Wren, disappeared on the Isle of Skye, 1724. Eleanor, entranced, reached into the case and took the wand in her hand. The scream that tore through the tower that night woke half the castle. She was found unconscious, her hair white as snow, her voice lost forever. Though she lived, she never spoke again. Her own wand ceased to function. She spent her final school years in the hospital wing and died mysteriously at 32, her death recorded with no cause. Her name was later added to the gallery, her own wand displayed beside that of Agnes Wren, the twin pulses of their wands forever synchronized in silent mourning. Eleanor's tale is now a warning carved into the wall at the entrance of the gallery. Let the soul rest, do not awaken it. But the Gallery of Lost Wands is more than a crypt of tragedy. It is a monument to the persistence of magic beyond understanding. Each wand resonates, waiting, watching. Every few years, without any trigger or logical explanation, one of the wands begins to glow faintly. The light varies, sometimes a soft blue like morning fog, sometimes a harsh red that seems to stain the glass. And every time this happens, the professors know a new student has arrived who shares the same magical vibration as the wand's previous master. This phenomenon is known among the staff as the returning echo. Professor Amari Holt of Charms, who has served at Ilvermorny for nearly 5 decades, has kept a secret journal recording every incident of the returning echo. According to her notes, The most recent occurrence was in 2014 when the wand of Gideon Crane began to shimmer with a pale green hue. Gideon, a Pukwudgie student from the early 1900s, vanished during an expedition to a ley line nexus in the Yukon. His journal had suggested he was close to discovering a way to channel ley energy through wandless magic, but he was never seen again. When his wand began to glow, it coincided with the arrival of a new Wampa student named Devon Hale, a boy whose spells consistently produced unintended wild side effects. Though Devon was never told about the connection, Professor Holt wrote, "The wand knew, it recognized a kindred frequency, but to give it to him would have been like handing him a ghost." Indeed, no wand has ever been removed from the gallery since the Finch incident. It is believed that the bond between wand and master transcends physical presence. The magic, once entwined with a soul, is no longer neutral. It remembers, and it mourns. Another haunting example is the case of Lillian Sycamore, a healer in training, from the class of 1931. Her wand, maple wood with a thunderbird tail feather core, now lies dormant in the gallery. Lillian disappeared during the flu fever outbreak that swept through the wizarding world in the 1930s. Some say she tried to heal Muggle children and was punished by a purist faction of the Magical Congress. Others claim she attempted to develop a potion that counteracted the fever's magical strain, vanishing after testing it on herself. When her wand began to glow in 1962, it illuminated with an orange flame, flickering like a candle at sunset. That year, a young girl named Miriam Ochoa arrived at Ilvermorny and instinctively began brewing restorative potions far beyond her year. Though she struggled with theory, her touch seemed to draw wellness from the very air. "I walked past Lillian's case one day and saw it pulse like a heartbeat," wrote Headmistress Alma Drake in a confidential letter to the MACUSA Department of Magical Heritage. "We believe magic is learned, but sometimes I wonder if it is inherited through the very soul." Ilvermorny's founders, especially Eselt Sayer, believed that wands had a consciousness. In her own writings, preserved in the school's secret archive, she wrote, "Magic is not blind, it watches, it waits. When we die, we return to the stream, but the wand remembers the river we shaped." Her own wand, once lost, was said to have disintegrated upon her death, an occurrence never repeated and still unexplained. The enchantments around the gallery are old and potent. No one, not even the headmistress, can remove a wand without triggering a protective charm that stuns the intruder. These spells were laid by early generations of Ilvermorny's wardens, powerful witches and wizards who feared that those with dark intentions might try to harness the lingering power of the wands, and perhaps, more dangerously, that the wands themselves might wish to be held again. There are even darker legends, whispered among the older staff. Some believe that if two wands begin to glow at the same time, it is a harbinger of something greater, a magical event that echoes through time. This has happened only twice in recorded history. Once during the Salem witch trials, when two wands lit up in brilliant white. The other was in 1994, the same year as the Quidditch World Cup disaster and the rise of new dark forces in Europe. The wands pulsed for hours before falling dark again. No one knows what it meant. Many students have claimed that they've dreamed of the gallery before ever seeing it. In those dreams, they stand before a particular wand, their reflection blurred in the glass. Some say they hear whispers. One boy, Isaac Green, wrote in his diary in 1978, "She called to me from the wood, said her name was Brielle, said she missed the stars." He vanished a year later while hiking alone in the Adirondacks. His wand was later placed beside Brielle O'Connor's in the gallery. Both remain cold and silent. The gallery is a place of reverence, not curiosity. It is not listed on the official tour for visitors, nor spoken of during school orientation. And yet each year a few students find themselves drawn there, often without knowing why. The pull is gentle but insistent, like a memory of something that never happened. No student has ever graduated with the same magical signature as more than one wand. This singular alignment has led some scholars to theorize that soul resonance may be more precise than even blood magic, that it is not heredity or training that binds one to a wand, but purpose, destiny. The idea is unsettling to those who believe in choice. But the wands do not lie. There is one empty case in the gallery. No wand lies within it, but the velvet remains pressed and ready, the nameplate waiting. It simply reads, "The one who will return." Students pass it quickly, professors avoid discussing it, but the older ones, like Professor Holt, glance at it with a mix of fear and hope. For if a wand appears there on its own, then the magic has decided. And no one, not even the headmistress, can predict what that might mean. Number 26, the Oracle of Feathers. On the seldom visited fourth floor of the Ilvermorny library, hidden behind a row of brittle scrolls chronicling wand lore and forbidden transmutations, stands a narrow oak shelf marked only with a curling rune. Most students pass it by without a second glance, distracted by their assignments or the more immediate lure of magical dueling manuals. But behind this shelf, if one is persistent enough to nudge it aside, lies a niche carved from the same granite that built the castle itself. There, resting atop a stone pedestal encircled by dust and silence, sits the Oracle of Feathers, perhaps the strangest, most cryptic relic in all of Ilvermorny's storied history. The oracle appears deceptively simple, a shallow bowl of burnished bronze, no larger than a breakfast plate, filled with feathers of every color and texture. Yet even a brief glance reveals the artifact's unsettling nature. The bowl never accumulates dust. The feathers shift subtly even in still air, as though stirred by a breeze felt only by them. Ancient runes line the rim, carved so deep that they shimmer faintly in the dark. No one has ever translated the full meaning of those runes, though Professor Alonzo Beek, a scholar of ancient script, once claimed they were neither Celtic nor Algonquin, but something older and more conscious than either. The oracle is not catalogued in any school record, and even most teachers rarely speak of it aloud. Only the senior keepers, typically the three oldest professors in residence, know how to use it properly. These individuals rotate with age, experience, and a mysterious criteria no one openly acknowledges. Currently, they include Professor Juniper Wilkes of Magical Ethics, Professor Haruto Gray from the Department of Cryptozoology, and the ever-reticent Professor Adeline Crowe, who teaches ritual magic and is said to have once studied under shamanic mystics in the Canadian North. The keepers alone are allowed to interpret the oracle's answers, which come not in speech or inscription, but through the rising and circling of a single enchanted feather. To ask a question, one must lean close and exhale gently into the bowl. The act must be deliberate but respectful. The oracle, it is said, does not respond well to the impatient or mocking. Once the breath touches the feathers, they rustle, as if considering the question. Then one feather, never more, never less, rises and begins to drift upward, spinning in place, then spiraling outward. Its path is silent and slow, mesmerizing, until it finally falls gently back into the bowl. The keepers watch, interpret the trajectory, the rhythm, even the arc of descent. What they offer in return is always abstract, couched in riddles or metaphor. And yet in over 2 centuries of its existence, the oracle has never once been proven wrong. One of the most chilling examples is the case of Elias Finch, a horned serpent student in the class of 1911. Bright, quiet, with a fondness for cartography and a peculiar habit of tracing stars on his parchment margins, Elias often wandered the surrounding woods alone, always searching for ley lines and magical anomalies. He believed that the forests of Massachusetts held secrets not found in books. In October of 1910, he visited the oracle, accompanied by Professor Rena Hartwell, who served then as one of the keepers. The question he whispered was never recorded, but the feather that rose, a silver-tipped quill from a thunderbird, according to Hartwell's private journal, circled high and wide, then crashed violently into the stone floor, where it disintegrated into ash. Professor Hartwell wrote that the oracle's message was a clear shudder through the bones of fate. When asked for a verbal interpretation, she replied only, "The wind warns of absence. A path taken will not return." Most dismissed the answer as poetic nonsense. But less than a year later, during an approved magical excursion to the Laurentian forests of Quebec, Elias vanished. No trace of him was ever found. Not a thread of his travelling cloak, not a shattered wand, not even a drop of enchanted ink from his beloved star maps. The Canadian ministry investigated for months, even enlisting spirit guides and whispering owls, but Elias was simply gone. The forest had devoured him whole. To this day, every first-year horned serpent learns about Elias Finch, not from textbooks, but whispered in shared beds after curfew, with candlelight flickering like the feathers of the oracle itself. Some believe he crossed into another plane. Others say he met a creature too ancient to be named. But no one, not even the Ministry of Magic, has dared to question the oracle since. As Professor Crow once said in her only public statement about the artifact, the oracle does not lie. It does not warn for pleasure. When it moves, the air listens. More recently, in 2007, the oracle stirred once again in a way that would ripple across the school. During a particularly harsh winter, a Pukwudgie student named Sierra Tompkins, curious about her future career, visited the oracle under the supervision of Professor Gray. She had dreams of becoming a magizoologist, but feared her dyslexia would prevent her from passing the required spellcraft exams. She asked, simply, "Will I find my way?" A downy cerulean feather rose, hovered briefly, and spiraled toward the east window, where it tapped 3 times before floating back into the bowl. Professor Gray interpreted it thus: "Not by the wand, but by the footstep. Your path walks ahead of knowledge." At the time, this answer seemed frustratingly vague. But less than 5 years later, Sierra published her first fieldwork essay on the migratory patterns of the moon calf, having discovered a previously unknown nesting site in the Appalachian caverns, without ever completing her spellcraft qualification. Her name now appears in 3 major journals, and her work is cited by magical conservationists worldwide. What unnerves many students is that the oracle never answers twice. Repeat visitors are met with stillness. The feathers lie unmoved, their silence more absolute than refusal. The object possesses a kind of sentience, a selective awareness. It decides when to speak and when to slumber. There have been occasions, rare and unsettling, when the oracle responded without being asked. In 1963, during the aftermath of a dueling accident that left a student in a coma, Professor Winthrop Murrow found the oracle bowl trembling slightly, a lone feather spinning slowly without provocation. No one had approached it. No question had been asked. The feather, a black and gold plume, later identified as belonging to the mythical eclipse hawk, flew in a tight spiral and burst into green sparks before vanishing. Hours later, the student awoke, with no memory of the duel. Speculation runs wild, of course. Some claim the oracle is a fragment of an older magic, older even than Ilvermorny itself, a relic brought from across the sea or pulled from a star-fallen crater in forgotten lands. One theory, shared only in hushed tones among horned serpent students, insists the feathers are bound to the spirits of magical birds who once served as omens to seers of long-lost civilizations. Another insists the runes on the rim match those found in ruins deep beneath the Hudson Bay, where no human has dwelled for millennia. Professor Wilkes has publicly discouraged such ideas, but she has been seen lingering at the oracle late into the night, her fingers gently tracing the bowl's edges. The school has never permitted full magical analysis of the oracle. Diviners have requested to scry it, alchemists have begged to study its material, but all requests are denied by unanimous faculty vote. The reason is always the same. To dissect a mystery is to kill it. Those who work with the oracle understand that it operates on rules outside the curriculum. As Professor Crow once wrote in her personal memoir, we do not use the oracle, we witness it, and in its movement we are reminded that not all knowledge bends to the wand. Even the placement of the oracle is deliberate. It sits surrounded by silence, by forgotten parchments, by the dust of the unread. Students seeking it must stumble upon it, must desire its wisdom more than comfort, and always they must approach with care. It is not a thing to be trifled with, not a toy for idle questions. The oracle does not answer what you want to know, it answers what it chooses for you to understand. Those who have stood before it often speak of a moment brief, like the flicker of a candle, where the world feels suspended. The air around the oracle thickens, charged like the breath before a thunderstorm. The chosen feather does not float, it dances, and when it falls, something inside you changes, not always immediately, but eventually as the years unravel and fate stitches itself into patterns, the meaning arrives, soft and undeniable. The oracle of feathers remains, not as a tool, but as a witness, a relic that has seen futures drift by like the feathers it commands. It does not shout, it does not promise, it knows. Number 27, the legend of the forgotten fifth house. In the quiet shadows of the vast American magical landscape, Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry stands like a solemn guardian atop Mount Greylock. Its granite halls echo with centuries of whispered secrets and forgotten truths. While every witch and wizard knows of the four houses, Thunderbird, Wampus, Horned Serpent, and Pukwudgie, passed down as sacred tradition from the time of Isolde Sayre and James Stewart, there are murmurs of something older, something omitted. A sliver of legend, rarely acknowledged and even more rarely believed, tells of a lost fifth house, a house that never bore the form of a magical beast, but instead embodied the soul itself, pure and luminous. Isolde Sayre, the Irish witch who co-founded Ilvermorny, is remembered in official histories as the heart of the institution, a visionary who blended old-world magic with the raw promise of the new world. In her preserved journals, safeguarded in the Ilvermorny Library's restricted section, there are references to dreams and symbols far stranger than the familiar four houses. On one fragmented page, worn and faded with age, she writes, "In the silence between Wampus and Horned Serpent, I beheld a figure of light, faceless yet known, glowing with knowledge and longing. It reached for the stars and burned with purpose. It was neither beast nor man. It was us." This passage, long dismissed as poetic musing, resurfaces in discussions surrounding the so-called fifth essence. Some historians claim that before finalizing the four houses, Isolde and James envisioned a fifth, not an animal or elemental force, but the embodiment of the human spirit, curious, compassionate, and untamed. A house meant not for a specific skill or inclination, but for the seeker, the dreamer, the ones who did not fit within strict boundaries. This house, unnamed in official records, was to be a sanctuary for those who possessed the elusive trait of inner light, an ineffable, radiant pull toward truth, connection, and transformation. It is said that the house was symbolized by a luminous silhouette, often interpreted as a radiant human figure standing amidst beams of morning light. A surviving pencil sketch in a margin of Isolde's spellbook shows a robed figure surrounded not by a beast, but by swirling lines of ink that form wings of energy rather than feathers. The drawing is not labelled, yet beneath it is scrawled a single word in Gaelic, anam, meaning soul. This detail has become central to the believers of the Fifth Essence legend, who argue that Isolde had a deeply mystical view of magic as an expression of the human spirit, not just a craft to be categorized. There is a story still told in hushed tones by older professors, particularly those who have taught in the subjects of divination and magical theory. In 1872, a student named Emery Fenwick entered Ilvermorny and showed extraordinary promise. During his sorting ceremony, the enchanted statues of the houses remained still. Not one rose to claim him. Yet instead of embarrassment or confusion, Emery stood calmly as if expecting the silence. Then, without warning, the sorting room dimmed, and above him flickered a shape, a shimmering outline of light, not physical, but real enough to make the room hold its breath. Witnesses described it as a figure formed of morning sunlight and fog, ephemeral, yet unmistakably human. No house accepted Emery, yet he remained at the school, allowed by special permission of Headmistress Abigail Hawthorne, and completed his studies in a solitary manner. His journal entries, now housed in the Hawthorne collection, often mention dreams of the light body and a longing for a place beyond the four where understanding has no shape, only purpose. It is often claimed that the fifth essence was removed from Ilvermorny's structure at the request, or perhaps warning, of William the Pukwoodgi. William, known for his grumpy loyalty to Iseult and for his disdain of sentimentality, allegedly opposed the inclusion of a human form symbol among the magical beasts. In one of the few anecdotes surviving from this period, James Stewart supposedly wrote, William spoke fiercely of balance and the dangers of placing our own image at the centre of power. He would rather trust the wild spirit of Wampus or the cleverness of Horned Serpent than the human heart, which he says wears masks of light while scheming in shadow. If this is true, then perhaps William feared the vanity or instability that might arise from centering a magical house on something as subjective as the soul. The symbolism of the lost house has lingered in subtle ways. Over the years, students who did not feel fully at home in any of the four houses, who walked between traditions, defied categorizations, or burned with strange inner intensity, were quietly referred to by some professors as animari, children of the soul. These students often displayed profound empathy, sudden bursts of magical innovation, or intense prophetic dreams. While Ilvermorny never officially recognized such a group, the staff of the astronomy tower are known to leave certain rooms unlocked at night, a small nod to those students who wander when the stars call, searching for answers they cannot name.